Hello and welcome to how to design parts that are going to fit on non-3D printed components. So you can see here I have a tire that rotates, and it's actually rotating about a bearing that I actually used as a reference point, and it would spin about that bearing. So essentially what I do to start off with when it comes to this kind of design is I actually make a model of the piece that I want to design around. So this is the bearing. Usually what I'll do is I'll even label it the brand, not just the type of bearing. And this is just because sometimes when you buy bearings from different manufacturers or suppliers, they might actually vary in size. So then you can kind of have a decent library, but I only have the one bearing for now. But essentially what I did is I measured the diameter, as you can see here. I then measured the thickness. And then the last thing I did is I measured the other diameter on the inside diameter, assuming that these two are the same thickness because I checked that. And then I just made a bit of a groove to make it look more close to the bearing, and I put the label of the type so that I can see that for reference sake down the road. So this essentially is how I started with working with the models so that I know what size I need to make this rim. Next, we're going to take a look at the rim and go from there. So here you can see the rim, and essentially it is comprised of several different sketches that I'm going to have to put together. Now if I go back to the very start, you'll see that I started off with a blank, and this blank is actually the same diameter. As you can see here, it's a DeLorean that I'm working on. But essentially, if I just hide that image, you'll see that this is the diameter of the bearing. And then I just try to use the sketch of the wheel itself to kind of get a rough idea of how big I want the bearing to fit. So I wanted it to fit to make roughly the size of the rim, give or take. And then I basically extrude that from my blank to start off with. Then I made an extrusion like so to kind of create the pocket that the bearing's going to actually fit into. So essentially all I did there is I made it a 1/16 all around, and I extrude it out. So the reason why I'm making it the diameter the same as the bearing is it's what's called a interference fit. And that's so that when you press it together, it's going to be very hard for it to come apart so that the rim won't fall off when it's spinning, essentially. And that's why you want to have that kind of fit. Next, what I did is I actually did another sketch with another reference image in it. And the way that that looks like is you can see here. I took the rim again, and I utilized an image to kind of again give me a reference idea. I made my spokes of course thicker because it'd be too hard to print the actual to scale with how small this rim is. And then I started out making a spoke and used that as my rough idea. So that's the tire I want to roughly make for size, and then I just went and I extruded that out so you can see that it's now like that. Next, I did a circular pattern to give me something that looks similar enough to what an actual DeLorean rim looks like. I then did another revolution cut. So what I did here is just to give it a little bit more depth is I actually just did an angle that fits down to this point here, which is that thickness of between the bearing and the outside of the rim. And I did an extrude cut just to give it a little bit more of shape to it. That's suppressed, I didn't need it. Next, what I did is I did an extrusion just to cut out the material so that it doesn't look like it's flat. As you can see before, it was there. And then after that, I just gave a little bit of a chamfer, and this is because I just wanted it to be easier for the bearing to press in. And I would recommend doing that if you're going to have a interference fit, because then it at least gets it to kind of start sliding in, and then it can just push in. If you have a sharp edge, it just makes it harder to press fit it in. Next, what I did is I started doing some detailings to make it look like it had lug nuts. So I just did a little extrusion and a fillet on it, and did a quick circular pattern because it's a 4-bolt pattern on it. Then I did a chamfer just to give it a little bit more of what the hubcap looks like on the actual car. And then next what I did is I actually did an extrusion out. So this piece here is actually where the bearing's going to sit against, so that it's not sitting right up against this portion here. And that's why I did that for this portion. And then I just did a chamfer on that as well. Because if it sat against here, it might have interfered rubbing against this portion here or even here. So I just wanted to have a little bit more of a gap. And then the last thing I did is I actually just did a direction. I made it a little bit bigger to compensate for this extrusion. So I just did a pull out with that portion. So you can kind of drag it out with the direct edit. Depending on your software, you might have this, you may not. So that's essentially how I did the rim and how it fits onto the bearing. And that's why you do assemblies, is to check to make sure they have good fits, and why you have that reference piece in there to just like look at it in the 3D world to kind of get an idea. Let's take a look at the tire and then we'll go from there. As you can see here, this is the tire that I designed. It's got tread that looks somewhat realistic and a couple other little things that I did to it. So to start off with, what I did is I just did an arbitrary diameter, which I based off of the pictures that I had. You saw that in the rim. And then this is an interference fit with the rim itself. So same idea as the rim to the bearing, but it's a plastic, like 3D printed pieces. And then did a fillet. I did a quick chamfer on both sides, and this is just so that, again, it makes it easier to fit the rim onto the bearing, or rim onto the tire, sorry. Then what I did is I did a bit of a feature on here, and it's going to be hard to see, so I'm going to actually have to go into the side view here. So what I actually did is I made it have a little bit more of a bulge out on the outside facing portion of the tire. And the reason why I did that is it actually makes it look more realistic to what a tire looks like. Otherwise it looks kind of funky. So once you bring that out, it just makes it look more like a tire. It looks better on the 3D print than it does on the actual model. Next, what I did is I did a emboss. So I used a work plane, as you can see here, and then I embossed it, and you can see it's on both sides there. So I had to do a revolution cut to get rid of the inside portion, because you don't have tread on the inside of a tire. It's weird. Next, what I did is I did a quick fillet just to make it look like it's around the actual tire itself. And then I patterned it. So when you do a pattern, you kind of have to gauge it on what you want it to look like. So essentially when I edited the feature, I could have had this at 20 and it looked really funky. So I decided 32. I liked how that looked, so I essentially used that. And then that's what makes it look more of a realistic-ish tread. So that's essentially how I made the tire. And then after that, of course, I went back to my bearing assembly and I got it to fit. I would fit it onto there. But you can see here, you have the tire. I just pushed away just to give you an idea. That fits onto the rim itself. And then if I were to actually move this out as well, you'd see that they all fit kind of nicely together. So the bearing fits into the rim fits into the tire, and then that would go on to the body of the car somehow. And then it would be able to revolve so that the bearing rotates, but it's stuck onto the car basically. And we can go into that on another video. So hopefully that helped. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, this is Tyler with 3D Printer Store, and I hope you have a great day.